Okay, so I think we can slowly begin. So welcome everyone to the 15th edition of this webinar series. For those of you who don't know about European Capital of Democracy, it's a non-profit organization that was founded by the Innovation in Politics Institute, European-wide and dedicated to improving politics with offices in Vienna and partners over 20 European countries. And this webinar series is brought to you by the European City Network. As you can see from the map there, we're 24 different cities from 15 European countries. At the moment, Vienna is the current European Capital of Democracy, and they will hand over to Cascais in Portugal for 2026. This is part of the Network of Towns project, which is co-funded by the European Union. And we have a consortium of some of our member cities, Antwerp, Barcelona, Bologna, Braga, Brussels, and Cascais, who have come together to create this series where cities both teach and learn together with citizens from all over Europe. So today we'll be looking at data feminism, a tool for creating more equitable cities. This particular webinar is hosted by the City of Bologna with guest expert Giulia Sudano from Period Think Tank. So after this brief introduction, we'll move on to the data feminism presentation itself. That will be followed by a Q&A session and then a brief summary and outlook at the end. So without any further ado, I would like to hand over, please, to Giulia for the presentation.
Thanks a lot, Laura. Good morning, everyone. It's very nice to be here with you. So I'm going to share the screen for the presentation. Now you should see correctly, I guess. Yes, I see Stefan giving thumbs up. So we are set, ready to go. Okay, so very quickly, a brief introduction about our organization. As Laura said, I'm one of the co-founders and current president of Period Think Tank. It's a organization based in Bologna where we work in all of every part of Italy, and our main goal is to promote gender equity through a feminist approach to data. So data feminism, that's the subject of today. And so basically our core activities are based on advocacy regarding requests of data, gender-disaggregated data, and we work with them and request them with an intersectional approach, but we'll go into depth about it in a few minutes. So we work a lot with institutions. Our main goal for the advocacy as our main purpose. And so we're asking for as many gender-disaggregated data as possible. We're digging into very practical example today. So I'm going to give you a brief overview of certain concept, but the most effective way in our views, it's always to apply them to practical example, everyday life example that are useful both in our daily life, but also for those of you who are work in municipalities, so you can apply also for in your jobs, in your work every day. So data feminism, it's a methodology, so it has a scientific backgrounds. It's very well widespread all over the American continent, both north and south. There is a lot of work in Latin America about it. But definitely regarding its spreading, especially in Europe, was very important, this book. That's why I'm highlighting it in the slide. But I want to make sure I point out that data feminism, it's spread all over the whole continent in America, also the Latin part. That's important because otherwise we always have a more Western centric approach. So we want to, be, let's say, honest, intellectually honest, and acknowledge all the work that they're doing there. But this book came out in 2020, and it had an important impact. Was published by Catherine Dignazzo and Lauren Klein, that work at the MIT Institute. It was nice to say that this work had a long work in open access, and it was a community work. So even today, you see here the source. If you look for data feminism with the name of the book, it's all in open access. So all the contents of the book are available online. You can also see the community. They had this years of process of exchanging views and the contents of the book with community, with an international community, the researchers that wrote it with an international community. So you can even, look all the process that was behind this book. So it's very, very interesting. So it's also a method. It's important to point out, the method that was, behind it. So it's open access in the content. It was participatory in its exchange, so it was very interesting case. And so in this book, they were pointing out a lot of important topics. And the first and the most important, and I would like you to go away with it today, takeaways from this opportunity to talk to each other, it's the data is not neutral. So whatever, we choose to look at, the way we analyze it and what we make with them, it's never neutral. There is a choice which topic we want to analyze, which data we want to gather. It's always a choice. So it requires, of course, technical skills to analyze them, to gather them. But in the process of the choice, it doesn't imply technical issues. So that's the first thing that I want you to, take away with you. So data is not neutral, and so it always has with it, perspectives, priorities, political, cultural connotations. So we'll see in a minute a few examples. So having a feminist approach to data means, to make visible and explicit asymmetries of power, and also in the context data are produced and analyzed, and especially to make visible people and phenomena that are usually invisible. Just to give you a quick and easy example, I told you we're based in Bologna, we're an Italian organization, even if we work also at the European level. In Italy, there are no official statistics about LGBT people. That's a classical example of a group of people that are invisible to official statistics. So an example of data feminism would be to gather data about the LGBT community, for instance. Or it can also be, for instance, in asking more data regarding, for instance, people with disabilities. And if you want to intersect and adding more layers, you gather data about gender and ability or disability, and you combine it with age, with your social status, and so on and so forth. And that's how you build up a data set that give you back more features regarding the topics you wanna discuss. So here it's a summary of the 7 main principles of data feminism that you find in the book I was mentioning before. So the first one is examining power. As I told you, it's a political approach in saying what are the asymmetries of power in the context I'm looking at. Who has the power, who doesn't have the power? So it's important to, because power has to do with the choices we were discussing before, if you remember, right? So with data I want to gather, who decides which data to gather, what to do with the data, for instance. It also has to do with challenging the power, because if we are seeing people or subjects that are not dealt with, and people, civil society, organization can challenge the power. For instance, if official statistics don't gather data on a topic that's dear to you, it's important, or for your work or for a cause, it's important for you, you can look for this data yourself, for instance, or your organization. The third one is promoting emotion and embodiments. This has to do with a feminist approach, meaning it's not only important to gather quantitative data, but it's also important to gather other kind of information, like, for instance, with surveys or interviews, talking, to people about their feeling, their emotion. Think about, to give you an example for cities, how safe you feel for instance, to walk alone at night. It's a classical gender example regarding how differently men and women, for example, live public spaces in public spaces. So that are not, it's not connected to gather quantitative data, but it's about collecting feeling or emotion connected to a topic. So it's not to give importance just to quantitative data. Another one, it's rethinking binarism and hierarchies. So challenging classification, as I was telling you, most of the surveys are still binary. So if you just, for example, open up a survey on any topic you want to investigate, and you ask the person, what gender are you? So if you just open the question and you don't have only, male and female, but you give other option like non-binary, other genders, you want to write down, you are breaking binarism in this case. So just by one question, you can open up possibility for people to express themselves, because in a complex world we are living in, it's not just anymore, for instance, to a community and society with just two genders. The other one, engaging pluralism, so having multiple perspectives about a certain topics. So the more perspective you have, the better. Looking at the context, so considering the context you're working in, you cannot apply the same analysis in whatever context you are having, because there are different variables. And so you have to look at the context you are working in or you want to analyze. And the final one is to make work visible, especially regarding data. Because, a lot of, so they analyze a lot, for instance, big data, artificial intelligence. So whatever system you're using in order to function, for instance, has to have many insert of data manually. You have to put data in a system in order it to work. So this is a kind of work that sometimes it's overlooked, it's invisible, and sometimes people don't ask questions on what kind of people have to do this kind of jobs. And so it comes out, for instance, that most of the people that do it for big platforms are people from the global south. So this gives us also, information regarding the asymmetries, of power, of why especially people from the global south are employed for this kind of work, because they're paid less, the work condition, and so on and so forth. So to dig in closely to the practical example, this is the theory, the concept. Our organization, we try to find a way to make it how we use it in reality. So what can we do to change, the world around us? And so since 2021, we start to work especially close with municipalities. That's why we're very, glad to have the opportunity to talk to you, that you are connected to a network of cities, because we believe that the cities level, it's very, very important, because it's the most close to people. So it's the most important even to, bring change in a local scale, to see something happen in a short period of time. Because to expect, regional or national government to change their policy, it's a very, very slow process, as you know. Instead, with cities, it's more likely to see, change it to work with institution, civil society, and local institution to, bring change in our context. So we are asking with a campaign 2 engagements. The campaign is called Data to Count, and we ask institutions starting from municipalities to formal engagement. One is to open and disaggregate data, at least by gender. So first of all, I said open. So it's important to have open data. So to publish, the institution publishes open data in order to allow organizations like ours, but also, researchers, academic researchers, single citizens, to find data information about, topics of public life, and they can use them, read them, and use them in different ways from which the institution publishes it. So for instance, not to have a PDF, a closed kind of document, but to have an open format that allows, people to reuse the data in a different way. And the second and most important is to have this data, so disaggregated at least by gender. So if you say, I'm gonna give you information regarding poverty in the city, I just wanna know the number of poor people, I wanna know who they are. So what is their gender at least? And then I want to know their age, maybe even a connection to the neighborhoods of the city, so on and so forth. Otherwise, if I don't know well exactly the features of a phenomenon, how can I, solve it and try to improve the situation? And so if I have data, and then we will see a little bit more in depth, we can apply the methodology of the gender impact assessment. That's very, very important. In our opinion, it's fundamental to change the way public policies are built, basically. And we will talk a little bit more about it in some minutes. Here you see a list of cities, municipalities in Italy that already formally engaged with this campaign. So you have big ones like Bologna, Milan, Rome, but also very small ones. So it's something that even, small cities can do. Of course, they have less resources than the big ones, because in order to, do it, you should have at least, a statistics department that work with data. And if small cities don't have statistics department, it's more difficult, but it doesn't mean they cannot do it. So it's something that it's an approach, and there are tools that every kind of city can use. So now we start going to practical examples. So we want to show how, a gender perspective, it's important in every kind of topic, because I'm talking especially from the Italian perspective, because most of the time it's usually talked about, gender topics. So it's more about entrepreneurship, or it's about taking care of children. So it's very difficult to have a gender mainstreaming approach. So we always try to bring an example outside the usual gender ghetto topics, I like it to call them, and show how it is important, to get to a gender mainstreaming. If you think this year, it's the 30th anniversary of the Beijing Women Work Conference, where the concept of gender mainstreaming was talked about at the international level, and it was written in the international documents. So it's incredible how far we still are, at least in the Italian context, to have this gender mainstreaming approach. So that's why we are trying still, to work on. So I give an example about mobility. Why it's so important in any topic, and now we talk about mobility, to have gender disaggregated data, at least by gender. Because I'm going to explain you this graphic. The concept is women, first of all, usually women have, if we look at data, they use more public transportation than men. It's connected to economic reasons. Usually women have less economic resources to buy their own car, so they rely more upon public transportation. So that's the first thing to look at. So first concept is, look at the data. It's interesting to see in your context, in your cities, this is true. So are women using more public transportation than men? So look at the data of, the tick from the public transportation company, who are the users, of the public transportation company. In Italy, we know they are mostly women, and we know from studies, this is one made in Geneva, in Genoa, that tell us that women use public transportation in a different way than men, so in a different timing during the day. So usually men use it to go to work, so usually early at 8 o'clock in the morning, and they go back at the end of the working day, while women use it more often during the day because they do more things than work, meaning usually women have more part-time jobs than men. So they get out from work, let's say at the end of the morning, and they go and pick up the kids, or maybe they go to buy grocery, or then they go to the bank, to the pharmacy in the early afternoon, and so on and so forth. So they do many other stuff, so they use it more. So why you would say this is important? Because if you know it, you know that whatever decision you make about public transportation, it's not neutral. So if you cut off public transports during certain time of the day, it has a gender impact. So if you cut it during the day, you have a gender impact negative for women. Okay, so that's a practical example of what does it mean to look at the data and understanding the impact of the policy. On the other hand, if you look at the graphic, you see, and that's common in every Italian cities, except really the big one, you see that we don't have public transportation mostly after 9 o'clock at evening. So this means that the lack of public transportation implies a negative impact for women in this context. So they don't have an opportunity, a public transport to, for instance, get out, go with friends, go to cultural activities, sport activities, whatever they want to do with their life. On the other hand, if the cities will, invest in more public transportation, they can have a really positive gender impact for women. So to give you an example, in Bologna, in the last 2 years, 2 to 3 years, there was an increasing of public transportation at night. Bologna is a university city, so for sure one can say, so, okay, it benefits university students, it benefits tourists, there is a high increase in tourism, but especially, give more opportunities also to women, young women to move around. And another topic is that they support workers that have shifts, for instance, at night. So they have more opportunity also for work if you have a better night public transportation. So you see how many consideration and impacts you can have just looking on one graphic regarding the timing of the use of public transportation. So this is a source from a European project showing what I was telling you, so the gender difference in using public transportation. Men on the left, you see, usually they go from home to work and then sometimes to hobbies like sport hobbies, while women do many other activities during the day. So now I'll give you another example for public housing. In April, we worked with another organization called Sex and the City to produce this publication, this work that's about a gender atlas of Bologna for a feminist city. So the aim, is to go toward that kind of model. So now I'm just taking off this data regarding public housing, because from the first time we had the opportunities to look up specific data disaggregated by gender, as we requested to the municipality of Bologna, regarding the request for public housing. And that's the waiting list of people requesting public housing to the municipality of Bologna. So these are the list of 2023. And with the rankings, we look at, you see, 5,921 applications. The majority, 52%, are men, 38% are women. This is not surprising. Generally, women are the majority of the population. In Bologna, it's 52% are women. But usually this is common because to request the application for public housing usually requests one person for the family, and usually mostly all the time are men. But if you see the gaps are closing more and more, you also have women requesting directly public housing. And then I'm going to show you why it's so important to have specific data disaggregated by gender with other features. So for instance, if we look at gender and age, we can see that there are more women requesting housing. So they are the applicant. Women are the applicant in their age group between 30 and 40. And they are the majority under 30, while men are the majority, more than women, you see even 50% different between 40 and 50. So this is tell us, for instance, regarding women under 30, that confirms the fact that the higher level of poverty by gender is for women, young women under 34, and this is a national statistics, it's not just about Bologna, and older women over 65. So this, for instance, data confirms a national trend, and it confirms that usually men with family and children request public housing between 40 and 50. And then we know that in small families, like two-member families, the majority are women, compared to bigger families where the request comes from men. And if you see the last data, if there is on the total 6% are single parents, and among the single parents, 94% are women. So there is a specific, gender issue, because women, if have just their salary and they're not able to afford housing at the market level, so the prices are so high that of course they need to try to get into public housing because they cannot afford with their salary to go on the market. Now I'll give you another example, that's gender procurement. So the procurement for municipalities, it's very important. It's a sort of like direct leverage on occupation for the municipalities. You decide the contracts, you give services, so for companies and people around the territory, it's an important leverage, it's an important topic. In Italy, with the Next Generation EU funds after the COVID pandemic, Italy is the highest recipients of Next Generation funds in Europe. It was the country with the highest level of funds. And the Italian government decided to insert this gender procurement, so meaning there was supposed to be a threshold, an obligatory threshold of 30%. So with funds connected to the Next Generation funds, every municipality should, make a procurement where 30% of occupation goes to women, young people, and people with disabilities. What happened was that theoretically it was a good thing because we have a big problem regarding women occupation in Italy. It's slightly over 50%. It's between 52-55% of women are occupied. We have the lowest percentage in Europe of female occupation. And so having gender, and it's very also segregated. So women are most concentrated in certain kind of jobs compared to others and compared to men. So this clause, it's very important not only to increase women occupation in general, but also to balance the women presence in different kind of sectors. So it was a good thing. But what happened was that after several months from this provision was written in Italian law, there were guidelines for applying this new provision, and the government opened to several derogation from this provision. So unfortunately, what happened, and we fear, as activists, feminine activists, is that if you open up the door to derogation, people would have used it. And in fact, we found out that it was used, this derogation. So what I want to tell you is that having data, we had the data from the national authority, the anti-corruption national authority. We had the open data, so we could study this data. And what we found out, so here we look at what the municipality did. So the interesting thing is that we have all the data divided by all the municipality in Italy. So we could study the average of what everyone did. And also we produced an open access platform with every municipality, region, topic of the Next Generation Fund. And what happened, now we have data updated to July 2024. We are waiting for the new data because we had some technical issues with the data published in early 2025 with the national authority. We found out that 60% of the tenders were derogated. So the gender procurement was not applied, unfortunately. So this is to say, procurement, most of the time, it's very overlooked by municipalities, but it's a very important leverage for cities to look, with a gender perspective, who I'm giving the tenders to, what kind of companies, what kind of gender, what they're working on. So it's about, again, as we have seen with the data, not be neutral regarding the choices on the tenders for cities. It's very important. So now I focus on gender, but of course, any cities can combine it with gender, with background. I want to increase people with disability that work, etc., etc. But I want to give you a practical example in another topic that usually it's a lot overlooked. So now I'm going to give you an example of what if the cities invest in data and gender data especially, the power of information you can get to analyze the context and a lot of issues, and then how you can program your policies and actions in a most effective way. So this is the gender maps in Bologna. It's a project that was ended in 2023 regarding the publication, and was financed by the European Bank of Investments. So these are funds gathered from the municipality of Bologna from the European Bank of Investments. So I'm going to give you explain you very briefly what every map is, just some maps because it's 100 maps at least. So I just got a few of them to give you an example. So for instance, here you have a visualization. So maps are very important, useful for visualization. So it helps us visualize issues in the context of the city we're dealing with. So here you have a map of potential social fragility, and this is an overlook on individual social fragility that you can have. When, sorry, it's going ahead. So basically where you have the pink dot, you have a higher fragility from women in the neighborhood. So basically here you can, with just a snapshot, very quick, you can see the darker the color, the higher is the fragility. So first of all, you immediately have, an answer, a feedback regarding where is the higher social fragility in the cities. So you see the area that are darker and then where you have most fragility about it. And when you see the pink dots in the middle of the area, it's where the female fragility is higher. So you see immediately you have this kind of information. Then here it's access to welfare services. And here the concept is women are the pink circle, white men are, let's say, black circle. So they're not pink circle. So the higher and bigger the circle, the higher is the access to welfare services. So you can, again, immediately see in the map where, how the genders access differently the welfare services. So you can see area, for instance, here, where is the mouse? You see San Donato, San Vitale, where I'm moving the arrow. So here you see, for instance, the men have a way higher access to welfare services than women, while, for instance, in this further area, it's exactly the contrary. So you're seeing the differences among the areas of the city for access to welfare services. This is the caregiving burden. It's the same concept. So the pink is the women one, and the black one is the men. And the bigger is the circle, the higher is the burden. So you see how big is the burden of women on San Donato San Vitale. But if you recall the previous map, here we have men having a higher access to welfare services. So to give you an example, if you just overlap these two maps, you already have some issues that you understand you have to work on. So if in San Donato San Vitale here, I have a bigger access, I have a big caregiving burden for women, and they have a less access to welfare services, it means I have to improve something in that area, okay? And then if something is not clear, once I finish, we have the Q&A, we will go deeper in it, but I hope it's clear, the logic, even if given the time frame, I have to go a little bit quick. But just to give you an example, here it's about economic dependence by gender. And so you can see that in certain areas, there is an issue of women having economic dependence from their partner. Here you see services for women all over the cities. So you can see the areas that are covered and the areas that have less services. So again, if you combine this map to the previous one to also welfare services, you can understand the area that needs more support than others. Here you see women's shelters, for instance, but we also have centers for men that to work with men that commit violence. And now we go to the methodology of gender impact assessment. So these were some examples, just to make the final point. So you have seen how powerful, data are, and how powerful it can be if you combine the data on the spatial elements, the neighborhoods of the town. No? You just not look at data regarding, how many services there are. But if you put them in a map, you immediately have a response of where it's more important to work, especially in the cities, in the special in the spaces of the city. So this is really, we have the technologies to do it. So it's very, very important. Of course, it's important to have the economic resources to this kind of work. For Bologna, this was possible because there was an economic support by, as I told you, the European investments. But it shows that if economic resources are structurally invested in this kind of work, it's very important. It's a support fundamental to municipalities And not only for institution, even for organization working in the social sectors, in any kind of work, you know, and even for citizens to have information. So having this kind of information is very important from different stakeholders in the cities. So we should make, usually what we do also as an organization, advocacy also regarding economic investments to develop this kind of data and data application. So now we have the gender impact assessment. I want to go through briefly. I say briefly also because you have all this material, it's available. I'm just taking the main, the most important points from the topic, but you have all the material regarding it on the EIGE webpage, so European Institute for Gender Equality. They have plenty of toolkits, many materials, so I don't want to spend too much time, but just to give you a brief outlook. So gender impact assessment, it's a methodology and it's fundamental to understand the impact of any gender impact of any actions or policies, you know, an institution or an organization carries out. And of course, in order to do it, you have to have the data. So the data is the pillar in order to use this methodology. So basically, the process is that you have to define your policy objective. So the phases of the evaluation are definition of policy objective. So what I have to do, what's the objective, you know? So to give you an example, if we take the mobility we were discussing about, I want to improve the public transportation, okay? So first of all, I need to understand what I want to do regarding whether it's mobility, whether it's poverty, whether it's whatever top housing, whatever topic you're dealing with. Then I need to understand the gender relevance of the topic I'm dealing with. So how gender is connected to the topic I have to deal with, I have to deal about. So understanding the gender equality impact. So for instance, as I told you, if we work about mobility we've seen as a gender impact because women use more public transportation than men. Then I have to do a gender analysis. So I need to understand how, you know, what are the different gender effects I'm dealing with. So again, if we apply it to the mobility case, I have to see, okay, what effect it has if, let's say, if I don't have any public transportation at night and I put it, what kind of impact, what kind of gender impact I'm going to have, whether if I increase public transportation in another, you know, timing. This is about timing, but it can be also about zones. So I can also say, what are the places that are not connected or there is less public transportation, and understanding what gender impact I have, because I have to see who lives in certain areas, who are these people, so who I'm going to impact because I'm increasing the number of public transportation they can have. And then I'm going to have to do the gender impact weighting. So I have to establish how you know, the policy and the measure is going to contribute to gender equality and assess the impact gender relations. And then I'm going to see the gender results and proposals. So as I told you, there can be, if we stick to the mobility case, I have to understand whether, given the context, whether, you know, there can be different gender impacts. So as I told you, if I have an area where it's less connected, but for instance, for some reasons, is more inhabited by men, then I'm going to have a positive gender impact for men if they use more public transportation in that area. On the other hand, on the contrary, I told you about the night transportation. So if I choose, I'm going to work on the timing of the public transportation, I'm going to have a gender positive impact, especially for women. So there can be many gender impacts. And then I have to also weigh then what's the most important impact, because, you know, usually municipalities, institutions have few economic resources. They cannot have the resources to go after all activities that they can do, unfortunately, on certain topics. So they need to choose. So you need to understand which is the higher impact, and so where you want to devolve your resources to. That's basically the process. So you can have two types of processes in this regard. Sometimes, and most of the times, it's about up to date, we don't have institution using this methodology, unfortunately. And that's what we are advocating for. So we would like that any institution, any organization thinks that whatever action or policy they're doing, it's not gender neutral. So it has an impact that's different because people, according to their gender, live differently their lives, given the context we are living in, where there is a lot of oppression, a lot of discrimination because of gender. Gender implies a different way of living in the society because of the roles, of the stereotypes, the prejudice. So the most important thing is to, break the gender blind look at the world, basically. And it should happen also for policies, but unfortunately, this methodology is still not applied overall. So you can use it to mitigate ongoing policies, and we hope that's going to be done. On the other hand, we hope that more and more this methodology is used from the beginning. So for the future policies, this methodology is applied in order to have more effective and more just policies on the territory. So now we have this example. In order to evaluate an impact, of course, you need to have indicators. So you have data, and once you have data about a context, we didn't have the time to go through the specific, application. So I'm just give you a snapshot of the methodology in the sense of what you're going to do. So we're talking about the data. Then I'm going to give an example of an application very quickly. But the point is, it's very important once you have the data to have indicators that help you measure and monitor the impact of what you're doing. And in fact, we have for the Sustainable Development Goals of the 2030 Agenda, many gender indicators. Unfortunately, most of the time, they're not very well known because you have the 17 main development goals and indicators, but you have gender mainstreaming indicators at least. So there is the platform Equal Measures 2030 that's specific on gender, so develops a year gender index. So I wanted to show you that I'm going to block the sharing because I want to show you this website regarding these gender indicators. And that you should see now. Wait a second. Okay, because okay, now you will see it. Okay, that's a website. So what's very interesting is that this is the indicator. It's plenty. Now you see the curtain here. You have for every SDGs, you see indicators. So I just selected now sustainable cities, given the topic of today. And it's very interesting because here you have indicators connected to sustainable cities, like for instance, the one I'm clicking on. So it's now it's uploading the data about the indicators. No, didn't choose. Okay, sustainable city. So it's about women views on housing affordabilities and women views on public transportation. So it's very interesting because it shows you that if you have the political will to look at these indicators, you can make visible things that otherwise are not generally gathered. Okay, so it shows you that you have a will to investigate perception on certain public services by gender. You can have important feedbacks as an institution to improve the services in your territory. So for instance, women views on public transportation, and then you have, the map all over the world. So usually the darker color, the higher the satisfaction. So you can see that it's not a good satisfaction regarding public transportation with a quick snapshot on the world map. While, for instance, views on women's housing affordability, it's better. So you see the difference between housing affordability and public transportation all over the world. So like you see a swap again. So it's interesting, to see this. For instance, at the Italian level, we don't have indicators. It's not very well spread, this kind of use. So it's another issue on which we do advocacy in saying if you choose a certain indicators, it means that you're going to monitor that topic. If you don't use it and you don't apply it, you don't have the data and you don't have that indicators to check how your policies are doing. So that's why we do advocacy also on data and then indicators to use. For instance, for the Next Generation EU funds in Italy, our government didn't use gender mainstreaming indicators for all the missions of the plan. So this means that if I don't have an indicator, I cannot understand how they are going to their actions are going to impact, for instance, women's lives. And just to give you an example about that and about housing, public housing that we were discussing before, in the plan, in the document, the Italian government said, okay, women are more present in the public housing system without giving any data. So I don't know which is the percentage in Italy overall of women in public housing. And then we're saying, because we are investing money in improving the housing, public housing, because, we were putting new conditioning, we're going to have a more environmentally friendly and improving the buildings of public housing. So we are putting money on that. Automatically, women's lives is going to be improved. Theoretically, it's correct, but since I don't have a baseline, I don't know how many women are, in 2021 in the public housing system. I don't know in how many houses you're going to do this work. I don't know how many women you impacted. So I don't know, I cannot establish and see how many women will have their lives improved because of this action. So this is a practical example of the process, why it's important to have data and indicators, otherwise we cannot understand how policies are really effective or not in achieving their goals. And that's why these gender indicators by the UN system are very important, but unfortunately, at least in Italy, they are not used. Italy misses almost half of the data that are necessary to reply to the gender indicators in the development goals. So going back to the presentation for the last part, I'm going to give you a practical example. So it's again about public housing, also because public housing, it's a very, unfortunately, urgent topic in our cities because the cost of housing and renting especially is skyrocketing in the last 10 years in Bologna. So it's a really social emergency here. So I give you a quick example of the application of gender impact assessment on the city level. So you should look, for instance, first thing, you should have the baseline and the context. So we are looking now, just to make a quick thing. We are looking at gender because we have many gender discrimination for women, but having this kind of approach, it's for every person, for the well-being of every person. To give you an example, on the other hand, we know that, for instance, men usually do less health exams, prevention health exams, and that's why usually their mortality is higher than women, basically. So knowing this kind of data means that if you work on projects and activities to promote prevention of health exams for men, has a gender positive impact for men on this kind of topic. And to give you another example, we know from certain municipalities in Italy where we have been doing the gender budgeting that men are less present in cultural activities, like they use less public libraries, they go less to the theater. So having a gender lens means for a municipality in this case to say, okay, we have less men going to libraries and theaters. How can I improve their presence there? So I use a different, approach in this case for men, given the topic I'm dealing with. But in this case, for public housing, since women are poorer than men, it's important to look for the women perspective. So I should have the basics. So I should have the baseline with the data disaggregated by gender and knowing the percentage of women accessing now public housing. I have the target population of young women 18-35 and over 65 because I told you that usually on average are the poorest. So I want to help out first, the target group in the lowest with a higher poverty. And so my long term is I want to improve the quality of life of women that risk to lose their home. So since they are the poorest, they are more at risk to losing their home if they have to pay them at the market price. And so what I'm going to do, the longer impact, I want to improve the quality of life of women. So the final outcome is that I want to increase the number of women accessing public housing. So I need to look at the percentage of women that, compared to my baseline at the end of my activities, I will reach. So it's going to improve the percentage or not. So what kind of activities? I have to decide and set what kind of activities I want to do. So I give you some example, but can be hundreds more that you can come up with. So I can increase public housing units if I can. So there is an issue of availability. How many public housing I have? Are they enough? So maybe I have to increase them, find a way. Maybe trying, of course, to not build new places, but also how I use the one that are available that maybe I'm not using. Doing more promotion of public housing, because mostly can also happen that people don't know about public housing. You cannot give it for granted that people know that there is a procedure and how to do the procedure for public housing. So it's also about knowledge and awareness of the citizens, of the people living in the city, to know if they can have these opportunities, that sometimes you find out that people don't know them. And so here the indicator can be number of women aged between 18 and 35 accessing public housing, and number of women over 65 increasing public housing. So I'm giving you an example of two different indicators that intersect if you see both gender and age. So instead of having one that says women accessing, I'm splitting it for the age group. In this way, I can be more effective because I need to monitor these two age groups because they are both very important for my objective. So that's an example, practical example of how I can apply this method for a policy or an issue I'm dealing with. So the final part, the last few minutes we have, I want to mention in this topic for the future, because it's very important. It's something we're working on and that relates many cities in Europe. We have been talking about data, but we should also discuss because we are facing the challenges of artificial intelligence. So going from data to big data, and this relates to cities because already in Europe, there are many, there are coming up more and more urban digital twin. So now we're going to see what is this digital twin, but basically it's the application of artificial intelligence systems at the city level. For us, it's a very important topic for everyone, but we're dealing with, especially in Bologna, because Bologna is the cities that in the last few years invested a lot on this topic. We are hosting one of the main supercomputers in Europe, Leonardo. The city is investing in creating a data valley, Technopole. So it's an infrastructure that's going to involve the city, a big part of the city a lot. So we need to look at, these issues and try to get some of control regarding this technology, meaning not to, just try to block possible discrimination, but how can we use in a positive way this technology? So we should talk about this discussion. So in a digital twin, basically it's a virtual replica of a real object. So meaning having all the data regarding the physical cities, that can be the infrastructure, the services, information about the people. So it can be about, the buildings, information about the building, the communication system, so the infrastructure, but then also data about the people and the services. So it replicates the information that the institution has on the digital level. So what is imply? So that tells you some information about the project, but since we have few time, I'm going a little bit quickly on that. So it means that what I want to get you from that is that if we are discussing that we lack certain kind of data, because up to now we don't have many, gender-disaggregated data. We talked about data feminism. We talked about that many topics and subjects are invisible up to now in official statistics. If we don't make sure that this data exists, we have a risk the risk is that the digital twin, it will replicate the biases, the prejudice, and the discrimination that the physical city has. So that's why it's very important to make sure that we fix the issues regarding data before, technology still keeps going ahead. And the danger is that this technology is so powerful that this discrimination can be amplified in an exponential level. So that's why we need to be very careful about it. So here's all the information about the digital twin. It's an issue where the government in the next few years invested also European funds that sum up to 7 million euros. So it's a very important project. It's very significant that in Bologna, it's something that's important for us as activists, is that it wants to invest and create and make it a civic infrastructure. So it means the city or municipality of Bologna wants to do it in a way that this infrastructure, it's civic and engages citizens, stakeholder organizations that are also civic, not just, companies or certain economic stakeholders. So what we want to achieve and why it's important once you work on data feminism, that you apply this methodology and requests also for this kind of infrastructure and context, is that, you have a research question that relies on intersectional gender inequalities. We look at these different layers because we don't have disaggregated data up to now. We gather data to access the gender impact, of public policies, because in this way we really believe that this technology, we want to make sure that this technology is used to close social injustices and creates better and more just spaces. So we want to use it in a positive way. And we want to create, gender indicators also for the digital twin that can, amplify the characteristic and the features that you look at the city, because what this digital twin can help you do, it's you can make assumption, you can test policies before actually doing them. So you can, in the digital space of the digital cities, you can say, if I change this and that and I apply this proposal, what I'm going to achieve. And you can see and model and test the results before doing it. So it's a way to, it can have many good potential, but of course it depends on the way you do it. And that's where it comes a political outlook. We should not be neutral in saying, okay, we just took the data you already have and then you test the model. No, the problem, because we are seeing problems in the data that usually the institutions and cities have. So we want to promote a participatory engagement, make sure that it's a really civic infrastructure, there are local stakeholders, and that the civic stakeholder can support the validation of the results. And so we want to make sure that gender-disaggregated data, gender impact, all the things we talked about up to now are used also for AI systems, and then the cities, apply these tools and they're mandatory. And we want to avoid, that cities, let's say smart cities from the previous model, just became, security tools. Like you have a smart cities and a technology that control and do surveillance of people. That can be a risk, it can be a model that can be, dominant, but we want to make sure instead that this technology are used by institutions for social justices. And that's it. So I try to be as quick as possible. In order to open also the Q&A, if you want also to discuss, if there is something you didn't get, we want to talk better about it, but I was just throwing some questions also for you for the Q&A. If you want also to share experiences regarding data, gender-disaggregated data you already gather, you don't have, you would like to have, also about the indicators. Can be something also can be an opportunity to share experiences. So I hope it was clear. There were many topics. I tried to be as quick as possible, but I'm available for any clarification. Thank you.
Julia, thank you so much for that presentation. It was absolutely fascinating. And I like that you've opened this two-way dialogue now, so we can also learn about the other cities who have joined us and the kind of data that they collect. We do already have some questions in the comments, in the chat. Please now, if anyone else has a question, please write it in the chat and we will go through them one by one. I would like to take this opportunity now to introduce my colleague Elena, who is going to moderate the Q&A. Elena, give us a wave there. I think we can begin with Katerina's question, if you think that's a good place to start.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much, Julia, for the amazing presentation and really amazing input as well. There is several questions that I also got it in a private section because I wrote it that you can write in a chat. So I will start slowly, so make sure that everyone has a time to write down the questions or even raise the hand. We can ask Julia directly, or I will also provide it. So the first one is that, firstly, I will start from the beginning. It was written in my private message. Is how can we ensure that gender and use quotas in NRRP tenders are not just symbolic, but actually enforced, especially considering that 60% of the tenders were awarded through the degradations. So this was the first question I got it. A bit heavy question, but feel free to answer, Julia, and thank you so much.
Thank you in the meantime for the question. I hope we have enough time to go through them all. So in this regard, here the issue is that municipality had the power to apply this provision in their tenders. The problem was that the cities didn't do it. So because they're very worried, they don't have enough time to take care of the tenders because, you know, they're very far behind in the timing of doing it. They avoid to put it in the request from the tender in order to don't want to deal with it, to be very direct and simple. So the issue is that we need to make sure that they are in the tender. So the cities write down in their tender that they request a gender procurement. That's the effective way, because usually they derogate, meaning they don't put it. So it's not that they don't apply it, they don't write it down, and that's how, you know, they derogate. So they don't put it down in written form in the tender. So what we want to make sure, and that's why we had this report and analysis, we not only developed a open access platform, a website for every citizens who want to check if in its cities or cities the institution does it, but we also present a report in the Senate, in the Italian Senate, to member of parliament, with an advocacy you know, request to say, look, we have a problem. You need to make sure you should ask institution. It has to be mandatory. So you have to put the gender procurement in mandatory, full stop, because otherwise they don't apply it. They don't write it down. That's basically the issue.
Okay. Thank you so much. You have any inputs more, or can we also move to the second question?
No, I tried to be quick in order to go through the questions.
Yes. Let's go for the next question then. Katarina, thank you so much for the interesting question. I will try to provide it as well. How can this approach extend intersectionality to the improve urban public services for migrant women and the women of the colors? So this is our next question.
Sorry, can you say it again? Because I was finding in the written form, but I cannot find it, so I'm gonna.
The Katarina Bamberg asked this question. So it is about how can the approach be extended intersectionally to improve the public services for migrant women and women of the color. So specifically for
Okay, got it. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Also in written form. So basically, it has to do on the choice, the political choice on which data you gather as an institution. So if you say whatever issue I'm going to, I have data on public housing, I have data on education activities, welfare services, and I'm saying whatever report or gathering I'm doing, that's the information I'm going to have. Gender, age, background, and that's how you have the intersection. So it's a choice from the beginning saying, okay, what is the framework for gathering the data? What data I'm gathering and using? Okay, so it's about the choice of institution. Institution says, these are all the features I'm going to put in every survey, in every report I'm dealing with. That's how you make sure that you have the intersectional approach. That's why it's a culture, it's a mindset, and we're trying to make them understand the importance, because usually now what's going to happen is that they just put gender. If we are lucky in our activity, they just use gender, and we have to be, whoa, that's great, at least you have gender, but it's not enough, you know, very well, you know, because not women are the same. There are many features that makes the difference, like age, like the background, the ability, disability, sexual orientation, and so on and so forth. So how you make sure is that you make sure and you push that in your institution, in your organization, because everyone has to update the level of that. Even in our organization, in the civil sector, I mean, in every sector, right? It's a new method and approach that we need to apply and improve in every case, but especially institution, because they decide public policies. That's why it's more important. So it's a choice of the features you use for your work. And that's what's the most important that sometimes we have seen as activists working with institution, is that maybe they even gather some, not all the data necessary, but they gather some data, but they don't use it to program the policies. So maybe they have it for the report because they have to do the report at the end of the year or the following year. But the problem is that don't use this data in the process of the programming of the policies. They're not basing the decision on a depth analysis of the data. And that's the cultural mindset we are trying to change, basically.
Great. Thank you so much. Let's move to the next question. Since the period think tank challenged power, there must be people who are not happy with their activities. Is that right? If so, how do you deal with that?
Sorry, how do we deal with?
Because the period of the think tank challenged the power, right? Then this can be also triggered by for the people as well. There's some kind of group of the people, and how you some of your activities. And is that right? And if so, how do you deal with them?
Allora, sorry, I didn't get, how do we deal with whom?
With
sometimes, yeah.
Yeah,
Laura, please.
Yeah, since your activities can be challenging for some people, they challenge people, particularly in positions of power.
Okay, sorry again. Sorry, I didn't finish my coffee before this lesson. You see, now it's the lack of caffeine. Okay, thank you. I got it. Yeah. Yeah. So how do if you're an activist, you have to deal with it. You can piss some people off. You have to make peace with that. No, yeah, I mean, that's, to be honest, intellectually, it's an issue. But yeah, I mean, we try to make understand people of power that the less injustices we have, the better everyone is. So try to make sure that, you know, if you reduce and you close the gaps, whatever they are, the gender, background, disability, whatever, you improve the well-being of everyone. Of course, I mean, there are different, by keep being honest intellectually, there is an issue. It's very difficult. We are in Italy, a country where there is now the extreme right wing at the national level. So I think we have to mention this this element, because of course there is an ideology that it doesn't agree with that. I mean, there is a contrast of power, because you have ideology saying it's not, we don't want to achieve that everyone has the same opportunities, has the same rights. And that's a big, because for instance, LGBT people, they don't want to acknowledge that these people exist. Okay, we have seen at the city level, in places where the right wing it's the minority in the institutions, in the political, you know, council or whatever. So they react like these people don't exist. So why you're talking about gender disaggregated? It's a problem when I hear gender disaggregated, like if even from binary perspective sometimes, and it's even worse if you try to say it's not a binary word and immediately it's you are a danger, whatever. So the highest challenge, I would say, is this one, because it's a big wave internationally of political forces that don't even acknowledge certain people that exist and have the same rights just because they have different sexual orientation or gender identity. So the main challenge is that. That's why we're in the city level, we're still, you know, given this national context, it's really for us the most powerful way to work on change, to try to change things and show that you can construct better places because they are more just for everyone, and people are more happy, satisfied if you build just cities for everyone. So we try to work at this level, the local level also for this one, because it's easier to achieve and it's easier to have a best practice to prove that what you're talking about can be done and improves the lives of people, of everyone, not just because they work, the ideology of this political party is that it's a zero-sum game. If someone gains, the other loses. That's what we're trying to break. It's not like that. It's not a zero-sum. If everyone has rights, everyone is better. That's what we're trying to work on.
Thank you, Julia. Since we're talking about challenges, and there is also other question, what are the most common challenges public administration face when trying to apply all 5 EIGE steps in real life projects?
The steps for the gender impact assessment.
Exactly.
Okay. First of all, the problem is that they don't apply it. That's still working on the base. Please apply, understand why it's important you apply it. So the problem is that they're not applying it. And that's why with our campaign, we say, please take an engagement to do it. So we have seen in Bologna, they are starting to experimenting it really slowly, but the other are not even experimenting it. So really, we are really at step 0. So understanding why it's important, try to be honest. To be practical, what we are seeing, it's the most issues that the availability of data, and so it's the economic investments of people working on data. So many people were data experts you have in the institution, and so it's economic and the knowledge they have, so the ability of time and the political will. I mean, they have to have a political mandate saying, okay, you should apply this intersectional approach, first of all, because of course it changes the way they're going to work. And so it's political will, and then it's economic resources. What we are seeing, especially in this time frame, in the last 4 or 5 years, because we were having the Next Generation EU funds, basically public institutions, at least the cities in Italy, are swamped with work because they don't have enough personnel to manage all the extra money. And so basically they cannot be able to do anything new or that's challenging the current workflow because they're already falling behind, because they don't have enough people to manage everything. So what's really important is political will and economic resources to give have the people trained to work with the data and work with the data with a gender intersectional approach. So you need to train them. That's why we also have been doing some training activities with the municipality to provide the training to the people working with data using these tools. So these are the main issues. One of the things I want to mention, in case it can be useful for other cities, what we have been seeing in Italy is that sometimes municipalities, when they do contracts of services for public services, for instance, they can ask companies to do activities. They don't put in the contracts the obligation for the companies to give data. So it's very important that you are very well to have the obligation to give you the data. And also, sorry guys, it's the Mac system. I always forgot that if I do this, it's the balloons. Okay, sorry about that, but it was funny. And so it's remember to request, because once it's not in the contract, it's very difficult for institution to gather data at the end from the companies. And for instance, bike sharing, what I'm talking about, car sharing. Once you want to find this data to know how to improve your public transportation, and it gets very difficult to have this data from them because they don't have any other obligation and they use them, but instead they are public data. It's common, it's a common good, this data. It's from this, everyone. It's very difficult to get it. So please remember to always ask in any contract, service contract, the obligation to give you back the data and which data you want to have. So it has to be gender disaggregated, possibly all the information regarding intersectional approach, gender, age, and other features. Put the timing. So be very cautious of that, because then it's a waste. It's a pity that you don't have this data back.
Thank you so much. It's very important to talk about those topics, and especially like the Very well said. So I think there is more questions. If you have more, I think we don't have time today, but maybe we can follow up by email or we can collect it later. But I will ask you one more question now, so that we will have more time to close our session as well. If you could choose one policy to be implemented on a European level to support gender equity, what would it be?
Oh my God. So
Sorry
difficult.
for the strong question.
You know what? Maybe the most mainstreaming thing I will come up with, it's make mandatory all of that and giving resources to the government to apply these methods. Because as I try to show, if you apply them and you use them, it really changes completely the way you are programming the public policy. So because there are many, I cannot choose just one topic. If I have to invest in just one answer, I would say that I will try to make these tools mandatory for every institution has to do it. Otherwise, they lose funds. I mean, very strict has to find a way that they cannot get away with it. They have to use it. So gender-disaggregated data with an intersection approach, people trained in, I mean, and economic, but they should provide institution from the local ones the proper economic resources, because you cannot expect cities to apply all these things without giving them the personnel and the resources to do it. So I will have a law making them mandatory with a big chunk of money to make it possible and real. And then I think it will be a domino effect.
Oh,
It's
that's not very well answered.
very.
That was my mean question at the end, putting you on.
I didn't know about it, so I was just improvising.
Yeah, no, but you're absolutely right. To make it mandatory is the way forward. So I think we will just close the Q&A session there. Thank you so much, Eleanor, for moderating that so nicely. And we can, yes, share the next slide of the presentation as well. And thanks again to Julia for the input there. Learned a lot, and I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I did. So here we are, we're in the penultimate webinar of this series. We will continue with future webinars, and the next one will take place in June on Tuesday, the 10th of June, and it will be looking at the impact garden methodology. And if you just want to switch to the next slide, there's a little bit more information on it. Yes. And we'll have two experts there, and also two examples from the European City Network, from the city of Barcelona and the city of Vienna, the former and current European capitals of democracy. So we're looking at a new methodology, and it will be applied to the city context as well. So I think all that remains is for you to share your thoughts with us. You can scan the QR code here. And my colleague will also post the link in the chat, where you can let us know which topics you would like to see in future webinars. So you can scan the QR code here and let us know which topics you'd like to see in future series of these webinars. We would like to continue this learning and sharing with you. So the link is in the chat there, and you can scan the QR code. You can keep your answers coming in. We will be publishing your answers on our website, along with edited recording of this webinar. And the follow-up mailing will also include the presentation. I know it's a lot of information to take in, so you can have the presentation there as a resource. Okay, thank you very much, everyone, for your input there. You can keep your comments coming in, but I would now like to say thank you very much, and we will end the webinar here.
Thanks a lot. It was a pleasure to be with you, and I'll be in touch So Laura
Yes.
has contact, whoever needs an email on direct contact, I'm available, and we're very looking forward to be in touch with all of you.
Thank you
Thank you,
again
Julia.
so much.
Thanks, everyone.